Tucker Carlson and Fox News part ways. This is from The Hill. Tucker Carlson has parted ways with Fox News, the network said on Monday. We thank him for his service to the network as a host and prior to that as a contributor. Carlson's last show was Friday, the network said. Tucker Carlson was Fox's top-rated primetime host, netting an average of more than 3 million viewers per night, the most of any pundit on cable television. His departure from the network came less than a week after Fox agreed to pay $787 million to settle a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems over coverage of former President Trump's false claims of voter fraud in the company's software. But here's this from the LA Times. The decision to fire Tucker Carlson came straight from Fox Corp chairman Rupert Murdoch, according to people familiar with the situation. Murdoch is said to be concerned over Carlson's coverage of the January 6th, 2021 protests at the Capitol, where the host has promoted the conspiracy theory that it was provoked by government agents. So that's the line that people close to Rupert Murdoch are apparently giving, that this was over Tucker Carlson's coverage of January 6th. And certainly this was a surprise to Tucker Carlson, because here he is on Friday night at the close of what turned out to be his last show.
And I'm especially grateful for the pie.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Employee of the week. We're just make it of the year. Tyler Morrell of Coco's Pizza. That's it for us for the week. We'll be back. By the way, the entire episode of Let Them Eat Bugs, not quite as good as pizza, streaming now on Fox Nation. Use the promo code ORIGINALS for 30 days free. And we'll be back on Monday. In the meantime, have the best weekend with the ones that you love, and we'll see you then.
Whoa.
Now get your pizzas and get out.
Now, can I just jump in and say that I challenge the veracity of that claim by the LA Times, or what Rupert Murdoch says, that the real reason why they're firing him is because of his January 6th coverage. That's not why. They're firing him for several reasons. The biggest one was that he finally brought on RFK Jr. and they told the truth about Big Pharma. Big Pharma funds news to 70%. And so I'm guessing that was the last straw. I also know that there is a split inside the Murdoch family, and Rupert Murdoch has been wanting to get rid of Tucker for a while. And so I guess there was just enough things. And I think that the 70% advertisers coming down on them, Big Pharma, I think that was all it took. What do you think, Aaron?
Well, Jimmy, here's that clip you're talking about. Here's Lee Fong reporting it. Tucker Carlson last week ripped Big Pharma spending hundreds of millions of dollars on TV ads and news outlets, routinely parroting drug industry talking points. Is there a single example of a CNN, MSNBC, or other Fox News host ever discussing TV advertising corruption?
No.
And here's what Tucker said.
And try this at home. Ask yourself, is any news organization you know of so corrupt that it's willing to hurt you on behalf of its biggest advertisers?
Wow.
Anyone who do that is obviously Pablo Escobar level corrupt and should not be trusted.
Wow.
What would that look like? That level of corruption.
Wow.
Well, imagine that the Trump administration had made it mandatory for American citizens to buy MyPillow. That's one of Fox News' biggest advertisers. Imagine the administration declared that if you didn't rush out and buy at least one MyPillow and then at least another booster pillow, you would not be allowed to eat out. You couldn't re-enter your own country. You couldn't have a paying job. MyPillow, they told you with a straight face, was the very linchpin of our country's public health system. Now imagine, as they told you that Fox, as a news organization, endorsed it, amplified the government's message. Imagine if Fox News attacked anyone who refused to buy MyPillow as an ally of Russia, as an enemy of science. And then imagine that Fox kept up those libelous attacks even as evidence mounted that MyPillow caused heart attacks, fertility problems, and death. If Fox News did that, what would you think of Fox News? Would you trust us? Of course you wouldn't. You would know that we were liars. Thank heaven Fox News never did anything like that, but the other channels did. The other channels took hundreds of millions of dollars from big pharma companies, and then they shilled for their sketchy products on the air. And as they did that, they maligned anyone who was skeptical of those products. At the very least, this was a moral crime. It was disgusting, but it was universal. It happened across the American news media. They all did it. So at this point, the question isn't who in public life is corrupt, too many to count.
Who is it?
The question is, who is telling the truth?
Oh, my God. No one. I didn't see this. No wonder they fired him. Are you kidding me?
So does
He laid it out. He's giving the game away, and he's the #1 news show on it. And the reason why Tucker Carlson is able to tell you this truth about how the advertising game works in corporate news is because they took away all his advertisers, and so now he's free to say that kind of stuff. But apparently he wasn't, because the hammer came down from the top. And this was, again, let me throw it to you, Aaron. What do you think that this was?
Well, so we have the clip there. He's challenging Big Pharma, but also nobody on cable news was even close to him, even comparable in challenging the war state.
Right.
Not even close. No one covered the issues that he did. And we'll get to that in our next segment. He also featured leftist voices like us.
That's right.
Which nobody else would do.
Would bring on. And the reason why me, you, Glenn Greenwald go on Tucker Carlson, because MSNBC, CNN, ABC wouldn't bring people on who had an anti-war message or wanted to debunk Russiagate. Even Democracy Now! Stopped bringing people on to debunk Russiagate, right? They stopped bringing on you. They stopped bringing on
Stephen F. Cohen, the late scholar who was one of their top guests. He was banned. He was also welcome on Tucker's show.
Glenn Greenwald was banned from. Tucker Carlson. That this might blow a lot of shitlibs' minds, but Tucker Carlson doing way better journalism, especially the last couple years, than everybody else combined in cable news. They're all horrible. He would tell the truth about Julian Assange. He would tell the truth about Syria. He would tell the truth about Venezuela. He would tell the truth about Ukraine right now, and now he's telling the truth about vaccines and how Big Pharma corrupted everything around COVID.
Here's Max Blumenthal. Tucker Carlson, Fox's top-rated host and the most outspoken, influential critic of NATO's Ukraine proxy war on national TV, was fired just weeks after the 20th anniversary of MSNBC firing its top-rated host, Phil Donahue, for opposing the Iraq War. U.S. cable news is regime media.
I just want to point out that I tweeted out the same sentiment before Max tweeted that out. So that was, if you go track.
I had that. Look at it right here.
There it is.
So now there are 0 people telling the truth about Ukraine or war in general on TV news. 0.
No, I also tweeted out the thing about Phil Donahue.
Okay.
So that was a big, nice pull for me. I bet you Max copied me.
I'm sure he did. Here's Glenn Greenwald. Tucker was the cable host who most, and I would say only, opposed the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine.
Only one. Who else?
No one else.
0. If there was another person, we would know.
Absolutely. Denounced the CIA, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security for its systemic lies and corruption. Devoted himself to a pardon for Julian Assange, and also covered the issue of Julian Assange when nobody else did.
That's right.
Objected to regime change efforts in Cuba. Criticized Trump administration's militarism. And I pointed out he also accurately covered and challenged the dirty war on Syria, including, I would argue, one of the most censored stories in history, the OPCW's Duma cover-up scandal. Unlike everybody else on cable TV and almost all of leftist media. And for all my disagreements with Tucker, immigration, China, domestic policy, it's just a fact on certain issues, really important issues, like Ukraine, neocon policy, the Syria dirty war, Julian Assange, censoring dissenting voices. He was more accurate and adversarial than anybody else on TV and even in most leftist media. It's sad, but it's true.
And again, it would blow most people's minds to know that. But he has more Democrats watching him in the demo than MSNBC.
Absolutely, yes.
And there can't be that many people hate watching. There can't be more more Democrats hate watching Tucker than are love watching Rachel Maddow.
Yep.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's why cable news, as Chomsky pointed out, the news business is about manufacturing consent. Well, Tucker stopped manufacturing consent on several fronts. He stopped manufacturing COVID consent, vaccine consent. He stopped manufacturing consent about the war, which is one of the biggest. So those are the 2 biggest things you can stop manufacturing consent about. And so he's not useful to the machine anymore. And that's why they took away all his advertising, but he was still useful to. And so now that's that. Go ahead. You want to say something, Kurt?
I just saw some clip of him. He must have just done this speech at the Heritage Foundation defending the black socialists who got arrested.
Yes. I got that clip. We show that.
Oh, that's another thing too. Yeah, he's the only one. He blew the whistle on Russiagate, right?
Absolutely, he did. He covered he called bullshit on Russiagate from the start and brought on leftists like us who would challenge it when leftist outlets would freeze us out. But Wyatt Reed points this out, that even though advertisers boycotted Tucker Carlson, because he was the highest rated host, he was still incredibly valuable to the network. So Wyatt Reed says Fox lost more money by firing Tucker Carlson than it spent to settle the Dominion lawsuit. And already,
you think?
Shares of Fox Corp, the network's parent company, fell by 5% after the announcement of Tucker Carlson leaving, wiping $690 million from its market value. And even though the Dominion settlement was more, Fox will ultimately pay less because they can write off some of that.
They're going to get a tax cut break.
Exactly,
Is Fox going to replace him with Dylan Mulvaney?
So that's an example where the bottom line, it's not just about the bottom line. Insofar as Tucker's stance against militarism influenced his firing, which I think it did, then the companies are not just there for their profits, they're also there to enforce the state line. That speaks to what Max said about this being regime media, whether it's Fox News or MSNBC.
And journalists, as you've noticed with the Twitter files and other things, they're not there to tell you the truth about anything. Just like with COVID or the war or the Twitter files or censorship, that the journalists in America, 99.99% of them are there for narrative control, and they can't wait to do it. And so what another name for that is manufacturing consent. And so Tucker decided to stop manufacturing consent, and he wasn't doing the narrative control. In fact, they had to control his narrative, and so now you know where he is. But go ahead, you have more to show?
Well, there's a lot more. I mean, first of all, just to show, I mean, he's a weird dude. I mean, for example, his views on immigration I found to be pretty vile. So, for example, this is some of the stuff he said.
So now here's where we can both wholeheartedly disagree with Tucker.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to stand with him to oppose nuclear war.
Absolutely.
Or censorship or authoritarianism from vaccine passports. So here, let's watch. This is the part.
Well, this is an example of the kind of vile stuff he would say about immigrants.
Instead, our leaders demand that you shut up and accept this. We have a moral obligation to admit the world's poor, they tell us, even if it makes our own country poorer and dirtier and more divided. Immigration is a form of atonement. Previous leaders of our country committed sins. We must pay for those sins by welcoming an endless chain of migrant caravans. That's the argument they make. If it sounds like something that some dopey sociology professor at Long Beach State thought up half drunk in the 70s, you're right. That's pretty much exactly what it is.
Yes, that's the stuff where, you know.
When was this?
That's a few years ago, but that's the kind of stuff
was
where.
Was this when there was the caravan that was coming up from somewhere? It was like a huge story for like a month. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do remember
Maybe,
that.
yeah.
Yes, the caravan, they were all criminals. And
was it like the Mariel boat left again? Was that what it was like? Or no?
Well, the joke I used to do is there are 1,000 Hispanics. They're all criminals, and they're walking to America. And I'm like, what kind of a criminal walks across Mexico the long way and then steals a car? Right? Those are some pretty remedial criminals. Point. I think we could absorb those. But you object mostly to what he said about more immigrants make our country poorer and dirtier.
Yeah.
I mean, no, if you hire so many of them as cleaning people, it doesn't add up.
That doesn't add up. That doesn't add up at all. Right? So, I would vehemently push back against that.
Yeah, of course.
On him, is that because I think immigrants actually make our country stronger.
Well, what is he saying? If there's a few years ago, is that part of the reason he's gone? Is not saying enough stuff like that and saying too much stuff like the other?
I mean, he certainly has, in the last few years, he's certainly done a lot more segments that are anti-war, pro-Julian Assange. This is just a sample of some of the Julian Assange segments he did, and that right there is more than most other cable news shows combined. Everyone else just ignores Julian Assange or cheers on his imprisonment. Tucker Carlson not only covered it, but actually lobbied hard the Trump administration to give him a pardon, which ultimately didn't happen. Yes, and he would
bring me on to talk about it all the time. Even when he didn't agree with me on that, he let me come on his show and advocate for Julian Assange. And that was nobody else would do that.
Here's Michael Tracy. Fox News has eliminated the only reason why anyone under 40 pays any attention to Fox News.
That is true.
And this idea that he was a Trump sycophant.
He wasn't.
It's just not true. For example, Fox's Tucker Carlson breaks with colleagues and criticizes Trump's strike on Iranian generals.
Yes.
When Trump sided again with his neocon cabinet, people like Tucker Carlson was pretty much the only Republican voice, prominent one, to criticize that. Here's Anya Parampil. She points this out. I wrote in March, if the Dominion lawsuit succeeds in bankrupting Trump.
Bankrupting Fox.
Fox. Or even casting Tucker Carlson as a network scapegoat, it will have succeeded in punishing the media's preeminent opponent of the escalating Ukraine proxy war.
Yep.
It is interesting that right after this Dominion settlement happens, he gets fired. But what's interesting, he often gets accused of, pushing Trump's claims about January 6th, but he didn't. He pushed back on them. This is a CNN media reporter pointing this out.
I didn't know that he did, because the way and even now I saw it get reported, it sounds like they do not mention that he was like, there's no evidence for this.
I know. They never mentioned that, but
I didn't know until we did the story.
Exactly.
You mean for the Dominion thing?
Yes, I had no idea. He's the only guy on his show who was saying the same thing he was saying off in this phone conversation.
Yes.
But the media leaves that part out, except for this one case. This is Oliver Darcy. He's a reporter with CNN. This is one of the few times that an establishment media journalist will acknowledge this. Tucker Carlson calls out Sidney Powell, and this was the lawyer who was, close to Trump and pushing all this stuff about vote rigging by Dominion. Calls out Sidney Powell, saying he asked her for evidence to support her election fraud claims, but she never sent us any evidence despite a lot of requests, polite requests, not a page. And here he is.
We took Sidney Powell seriously. We had no intention of fighting with her. We've always respected her work. We simply wanted to see the details. How could you not want to see them? So we invited Sidney Powell on the show. We would have given her the whole hour. We would have given her the entire week, actually, and listened quietly the whole time at rapt attention. That's a big story. But she never sent us any evidence, despite a lot of requests, polite requests, not a page. When we kept pressing, she got angry and told us to stop contacting her. When we checked with others around the Trump campaign, people in positions of authority, they told us Powell has never given them any evidence either, nor did she provide any today at the press conference. Powell did say that electronic voting is dangerous, and she's right. We're with her there. But she never demonstrated that a single actual vote was moved illegitimately by software from one candidate to another. Not one. So why are we telling you this? We're telling you this because it's true. And in the end, that's all that matters, the truth. It's our only hope. It's our best defense.
Now imagine someone on MSNBC or CNN saying that about Russiagate.
Russiagate.
We're telling you this. There's no evidence of a Trump-Russia conspiracy or that Russia rigged the votes, hacked the votes, because it's the truth. There's not one comparable personality on either of those networks, CNN or MSNBC, would ever say something like that.
No, and again, people. So look what they do this to Joe Rogan. They do it to Tucker Carlson. As soon as they start telling the truth, everybody loved Tucker Carlson before when he wore a bow tie.
The thing you showed,
and he was repeating because CIA talking points on Iraq War and all that. They all loved him. Everybody, Rachel Maddow used to do a show with him. Everybody loved him. But the problem is he started telling truth that they didn't like, and so they have to, just like they did to the guitarist who got vaccine injured. Eric Clapton. Yeah, they immediately go to he's a racist, he's a sexist, he's a racist. Same thing they did to Bernie Sanders. He's a sexist, he's a Russian. The same. So it's not because of the stuff that they claim they don't like about Tucker. It was 3 years old, the one he showed. That's right, because
him talking about immigrants, that was fine. His job was not in jeopardy when he said those things.
That's the kind of stuff that Bill and Hillary Clinton used to say. That about immigrants. They used to say that stuff. So again, yes. Go ahead, over to you.
Well, yeah, and look, here he is speaking recently, talking about the media being part of the control apparatus.
Oh, this is unbelievable. This is why they let him go.
And he even said, I'm part of the problem.
Oh, this is on Full Send.
Like, I've spent my whole life in the media. My dad was in the media. Like, that is a big part of the revelation that's changed my life, is the media are part of the control apparatus. Like, there's no... Yeah, I know, because you're younger and smarter, and you're like, yeah.
Oh,
but what if you're me and you spent your whole life in that world? And to look around and all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow. Not only are they part of the problem, but I spent most of my life being part of the problem, defending the Iraq War. Like, I actually did that. Can you imagine if you did that?
Wow.
Well, what do you think? What is one of your biggest regrets in your career?
Oh, defending the Iraq War.
That is it?
Well, I've had a million regrets. Not being more skeptical. Yeah. Calling people names when I should have listened to what they were saying. Look, when someone makes a claim, there's only one question that's important at the very beginning, which is the claim true or not? So I say, you committed murder or you rigged the last election. Before you attack me as a crazy person for saying that, maybe you should explain whether you did it or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for too long, I participated in the culture where I was like, anyone who thinks outside these pre-prescribed lanes is crazy, is a conspiracy theorist. And I just really regret that. I'm ashamed that I did that. And partly it was age, partly it was the world that I grew up in. So when you look at me and you're like, yeah, of course they're part of the means of control. I'm like, that's obvious to you because you're 28, but I just didn't see it at all. And I'm ashamed of that.
Isn't that what the media?
Again, I think we did witness a red pilling of Tucker Carlson, and that's why he became the focus of people trying to get him canceled, because he went against the establishment narrative in such a hard way. And by the way, as soon as he started doing that, his show became the most popular show on cable news, because people are hungry for that kind of a message. I'm sure people got a kick out of it when he brought on Anya Parampel or Aaron Maté or me to debunk the wars and to tell them a counter narrative that you're not going to hear on MSNBC, CNN, or any place else on Fox. And as soon as he went against that, he became popular. And as soon as he went against that, that's when the propaganda media smears against him came. And that's when they took away all his advertisers. That usually does it. That got rid of Glenn Beck. But it didn't do it this time because he is so popular. But then it finally came down from Rupert Murdoch because it came down from, I'm sure, Big Pharma.
Yeah, and his role in coverage of the Ukraine proxy war, there just was nothing else like it on TV. Nothing. He constantly was bringing anti-war voices, and it wasn't just partisan. So one could maybe think he was challenging the Ukraine proxy war because this is a Biden administration policy, right? That if Trump was doing it, it might be different. But he was just as critical of Republicans who were supporting the Ukraine proxy war as he was the Biden administration. So, for example, here he is taking on Mitch McConnell.
Politicians in Washington remain mired in their weird boomer World War II fantasies where they're all Winston Churchill and Zelensky's the head of the French resistance. Yeah. We could give a million examples, but we can't resist, once again, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, last month.
I'm going to try to help explain to the American people that defeating the Russians in Ukraine is the single most important event going on in the world right now.
Defeating the Russians in Ukraine is not the single most important event in the world from the perspective of the United States. It's not even number 15 on the list. It's way below ending the importation of fentanyl into this country, and it's way, way below preserving the strength of the U.S. dollar. But if Mitch McConnell and Joe Biden and the rest of these reckless leaders have their way, an increasing number of countries will do what so many have already done, which is begin to reject the U.S. dollar. And what will happen then? Well, all those dollars will come home, and the value of our currency will plummet even further. And that will lead to poverty across the United States, and that will lead to the typical political and cultural volatility that inevitably follows economic collapse. Disaster. And we've seen it before. Of course, you know the famous pictures from Germany in the early 20s. Banknotes and wheelbarrows. When I buy a cup of coffee, that'll be 30 pounds of currency. Kids playing with worthless stacks of Deutschmarks. That was called Weimar, the Weimar Republic. And that government collapsed because of hyperinflation. And then economic collapse led to communist revolutions across Germany and ultimately to, fill in the blank, the Nazi regime.
Wow.
And
no one is saying anything like that. No one.
No, and again, and nobody now. and nobody on MSNBC will challenge the party leadership on anything.
No.
Anything. And he was different when it comes to his own party. And Kurt, you mentioned this earlier. Tucker, and here's Alex Urbestein pointing this out. Tucker Carlson, of all people, at the Heritage Foundation of all places, denounces the DOJ for its prosecution of the African People's Socialist Party. What statements have pro-Black Lives Matter Democratic Party leaders and liberal media talking heads made on this subject? Where is the squad?
That's wild.
This is Tucker just a few days ago.
That this week, the Department of Justice would have indicted a group of people I don't agree with, by the way, on a lot of different issues. Black nationalist socialists from Florida, okay, kind of not my demographic, but would have indicted them for criticizing the U.S. position, the Biden administration's position on the war in Ukraine, and charged them with felonies for which they're each facing 10 years in prison. If you told me that could happen here, I would have laughed at you. No. We have a First Amendment. That can't happen here, but it has. That and a lot of other things, which are gravely unsettling, actually, and people who were rooted in the Cold War story and the reality of the Cold War, again, my age, 53, kind of know where that goes.
Again,
Wow, you're right.
You compare that to like the Squad.
Where are they?
Nothing on this issue.
Nothing.
At all. Black leftists.
Where's Joanne Reed?
Nowhere.
Back when they got arrested, the only place I'd ever heard of those groups was here, like a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's why we're popular. That's why he's popular. He's giving a counter narrative to the establishment claptrap. That's what people want, and that's why YouTube and Fox News and MSNBC and even Democracy Now! Try to shut that narrative down. They don't want that's not comfortable for their advertisers or their donors. We're telling jokes in Nashville, Honolulu, Los Angeles, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, Cohoes, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Baltimore, Chicago, Rosemont, San Diego, and more. Go to jimmydore.com to get a link for all those tickets. Plus, you can watch my new special, COVID Lies Are Funny.